Hey everybody, this is Neil Pasricha and welcome back to Chapter 17 of 3 Books. We are the world's only podcast by and for book lovers, writers, makers, sellers, and librarians, and we are on an epic quest together to uncover and discuss the 1,000 most formative books in the world. We're talking about the books that shaped values, changed directions, inspired ideals, the ones that shifted generations and altered lives in these really rich and meaningful ways. You're only alive 1,000 months. That's the average lifespan right now. So we wanted to uncover the 1,000 most formative books in the world. No algorithm could do this. We don't believe in algorithms. We believe humans are the best algorithm. So we are sitting down with 333 of the world's most inspiring people to figure out what these books are. We have sat down with Seth Godin. We have sat down with Mitch Albom. We have sat down with Mitchell Kaplan most recently. And now in Chapter 17, here we are going down to Del Mar, California to sit down with the one and only Emily McDowell. I am so thrilled to share this chapter with you because you know what? You know what Emily does? She articulates something that we need right now in the world. She tells us about the relationships we have, not the relationships we want to have. To be more clear, she runs the Emily McDowell Studio. If you go to emilymcdowell.com, you'll find this incredible world of greeting cards and tote bags and all these little gifts that articulate things in an emotional way that we don't have the words to define often. Whether that's a Valentines Day card that sort of goes through the complexity of the relationship, whether this is a card to give someone that is battling cancer or someone who suffered from great loss. She's put her finger on something and is articulating something in the world right now that we desperately need. Because the greeting card industry, God bless them, but it's 150 years old. And oftentimes you go to the store and there's just nothing that articulates the way you feel, and Emily is doing that. She's also the New York Times bestselling author of a book called There Is No Good Card for This. This is a book that is what the title says, tells you how to navigate those relationships that go through challenge, go through pain, that we need resilience for, that we need empathy for. And I think Emily is articulating this kind of future emotional state of the world better than anyone living it. You are in for a treat because we are going to talk about her 3 books, which are all interesting books. There's a memoir in there. There's a book about writing. There is this weird, bizarre art book that you're going to hear us talk about. And we pull out from that some interesting themes. We pull out from that some themes about origin stories. What does where you come from mean for you in your life? We talk about how you raise creative children. We talk about how you make things people want rather than make people want things. Emily's got a fascinating advertising background, and she shows how you can take some of the skills from that area and apply it to doing good things for the world, as she is definitely doing. So now, without further ado, welcome back to 3 Books. Welcome back to the full moon episode, Chapter 17, where we're going down to Del Mar to sit down with Emily McDowell. Hey, Emily.
Hey, Neil.
You're on. We're on.
It's great to be here.
It's great to be here, too. We're in San Diego. Well, no, we're not in San Diego. We're in Del Mar.
Del Mar.
Yeah. Tell me about Del Mar. You know Del Mar better than me.
It's north of San Diego.
Home to neither of us. But
yes.
Overlooking the beautiful ocean. I actually feel like we've had this kind of I'm doing this finger rotating move that nobody can see, but this circuitous toilet flushing type relationship. That was a weird metaphor because Frank Warren, I don't know if you remember, Frank Warren introduced us.
Yes.
So he was Chapter 2 of 3 Books, creator of the largest advertisement-free blog in the world, postsecret.com, and he sent us a mutual note. Mm-hmm. And it was, I think, before your book came out.
It was.
There's a card for this. And he was he's got a really attuned sense of he's got his finger on the culture, right? So he's like, Neil, you got to check this out. And Emily, you got to meet Neil. And we had this fun little chat before your book came out. The book comes out, and now you've grown this empire.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Empire is a loose term, but I have a company that now I now have business partners in that company, and it's gone through some changes. And the book came out in January of 17, which unfortunately coincided with some crazy other stuff in the company. And so I feel a bit of guilt around the book. I feel like I didn't give it enough attention. I feel like like sometimes, like literally, and this is going to sound so weird, but sometimes I forget that I did it.
Wow.
Because my life, only because
Yeah.
my life in the last 18 months has been so crazy and like kind of unsustainable, you know, but like that was, and it was a tremendous amount of work, and like I think it's a good book.
It's a great
I'm
book.
biased, but you know, but
I've put it in my book club twice.
thank you.
Seth Godin told me, by the way, that book launches are a journey, not an event. So you said,
well, like
it's only been out for
it's
a
still
year.
happening, right? Like
yeah,
the launch is we're kind of just getting to the good part of the launch.
There's someone listening to our conversation right now in some gym in the basement of a hotel in Mongolia who's going to order There Is No Good Card for This by Emily McDowell tonight because it's a fantastic book that they might have just heard about. And by the way, when I said Empire, I had a specific image in my head. Do you want to hear it?
I would love to hear it.
Okay, this past Christmas, I'm sitting in like Christmas pajamas on Christmas morning, surrounded by like epic amounts of wrapping paper with my wife, our kids, her parents, her grandparents, and like, you know, there's this present opening kind of frenzy happening. And my 80-something-year-old grandmother-in-law hands a present to my 50-something-year-old mother-in-law, and she opens it in front of everybody, and everyone's all staring at it, and she pulls it out, and everyone starts laughing, and she's holding up a groceries and shit bag.
No.
A groceries and shit bag. So for those of you listening who don't know what I'm talking about, this is a product that you sell.
Yes, it's a product that I drew and that we make and we sell, and it's our best-selling tote bag.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's old. It's from 2013 and it's still our best-selling tote bag.
Everyone can relate to carrying around groceries
exactly.
and shit.
Yeah. It's true.
What's the origin of the design? Can I ask?
Actually, this one came from. It was just this was back when we just had folding tables from like Home Depot, and we were all just sitting around stuffing cards in sleeves. Like we had kind of just started, and we were just starting to make tote bags. And the woman who was my first employee, who's now our national sales manager.
Wow.
She was the one who was like, we should do groceries and shit. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. Let's do that. So, and then I drew it, and then that was it.
Is that how your designs and your cards? Because I've often wondered, like, I love this Valentine's Day card you have, which I think might be your first card. Is it? Or one of the first?
The awkward one that's like, I know we're not like together. Like the Valentine for the person you're like kind of not really dating.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, can you just do a 30-second overview of this card that I love?
So this actually did start the company. This was the first card that I ever did. And it was based on just an observation that there were all, at the time, this was 2011, and there were just like a million Valentine's Day cards out there. But like more than half of relationships on Valentine's Day are super fraught because you're like, I don't know if we're together, like, especially when you're younger, you're like, we're kind of dating, but like not really. Like, do I get them a normal card?
That's where it's complicated thinking from on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Like,
do I get them like a normal card and then give them a speech when I give it to them? Like, oh, this isn't that big of a deal, like whatever. Or then I give them nothing because that's also awkward potentially. And so either way, you're faced with two awkward choices. And so I felt like there should be a card that is like the text of that speech that you would give. So the card is like...
Can you recite it?
I think I can recite it. It's, I know we're not like together or anything, but it felt weird not to say anything, so I got you this card. It doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't even have a heart on it. It's not a big deal. Basically, it's a card saying hi. Forget it. Like, and the forget it is in like tiny letters at the bottom.
And all that text on the front of the card.
Yes.
Which is the opposite of most cards, which have very little on the front, and then there's this big write-up on the inside.
Yeah.
Was that purposeful as well?
Well, actually, here's an insider tip for the greeting card industry.
I'm curious.
So there's two kinds of cards. So there's the kinds of cards that you get in the grocery store and in like, like the drugstore. And that's the big card aisle. And those are almost all either imprints or those companies are American Greetings and Hallmark. And they own that real estate, and this is their way to do card. Like they have the way of like, we have the thing on the front and then we have the thing on the inside, and it's like the joke part 1 and part 2. And you as an individual, like as an independent card company, I can't get into those stores because the real estate is actually owned by those companies. And so we sell to boutiques, we sell online, but we sell to like, 1,600 boutiques around the world. And in a boutique world, the card gets packaged like with a plastic sleeve, so you're not supposed to open it. So almost all of them are blank on the inside, and they have the whole thing on the outside.
Oh, so you put it on the outside because that was the way for people to know
Yeah,
what it
because that's
said.
because you're not supposed to. Because in like, because you know how in like they get
Why?
kind of
Why is there
dingy.
plastic on them?
Because they're more expensive, and
Oh,
boutiques boutiques have less money than like CVS, and so they don't like they care more about their stock getting messed up. And
interesting.
yeah,
Not because they have pornographic images.
no, I mean,
I'm just joking with you, but that's amazing, and I love what you do because you just explained the classic thing I learned in like 10th grade entrepreneurship class, like in my high school, which is like look for a market opportunity that you yourself need that is not satisfied.
right.
And I've always actually been puzzled by that advice. I'm like, I can't see shit. I don't see nothing that I need that there isn't. I always, when I want something, it's there. Like I never really got that. But you've just said, hey, half of all relationships on Valentine's Day, in your opinion, fall into this fraught middle ground, which is never articulated in a card. So you created a card, it exploded.
Yeah,
Like it went crazy.
it went super
Well,
viral.
it launched a whole company with all your cards serving, am I saying it right? The things that we feel, not the things that we want to feel. Did
Yeah,
I
the
get that wrong?
relationships we really have,
Okay,
not
sorry.
the relationships we want to have.
Okay, well, feel free to use my butchered slogan.
Hey, man, like
It's yours. The relationship we have, not the relationships we wish we had. Huh? Can you? Because while I have you on this,
yeah.
before we kind of talk about your books, now I'm curious. Can you tell me the 2 or 3 other bestsellers? We've heard the groceries and shit bag is your number one tote bag.
Yeah.
You've told us about the Valentine's Day card. Give me 1 or 2, and maybe just explain them to our listeners because this is theater of the mind. Like what does the card look like? And
Okay.
just send me 1 or 2, because I love them.
So we have a card that came out in 2014 that was a huge and also a huge viral hit. And it's a green card, and it has some nice lettering on it. And lettering is kind of everywhere now, but this was back in when it wasn't quite everywhere yet. And it says, "There's no one I'd rather lie in bed and look at my phone next to."
That's so funny.
And
That reminds me of a Dimitri Martin cartoon. Do you know Dimitri
yeah,
Martin?
I do. I don't know the cartoon though.
Yeah, so he's got these great cartoon books. Point Your Face at This is one of them. And in his most recent one, it's like a stick figure drawing
Yeah.
of people in the missionary position with like a blanket covering them, and they're both on their phone.
Yeah, it's
like literally on their phone. And it's so funny. But no text, nothing. It's just like he just put his finger on it.
Yeah. And I mean, this was, it was a universal. I worked in advertising for 10 years before I started this company. And so one of the things that I got good at doing, as everybody who works in advertising as a creative does for a living, is you identify universal truths. And in the case of advertising, you use them to sell insurance or cars or whatever. And you try to tell a story about this car that makes people want to buy it. And it's been way more fun to be able to take that and use those insights to make things people want instead of using it to make people want things.
Oh my gosh. Say that. Can you say that one more time?
So in advertising.
Yeah. But that sentence.
Yeah. So making things that people want instead of making people want things. Yeah.
And how do you differentiate those two sentences? Because they still want that greeting card, but you're saying, no, what you're selling them is the emotional connection.
Yeah. I'm selling them like I don't have to make up a story about why this greeting card is better than other greeting cards.
Right.
Like I don't have to fabricate an emotional connection about why Travelers Insurance is, when you're selling insurance or you're selling like, a luxury car that basically has no difference from the other luxury car.
Right.
You're trying to tell.
It says like drivers wanted.
Yeah, like you're trying to come up with an emotional hook, like a story that's going to get people feeling like, yes, this is the car for me. Like this car gets me.
So so give me, first of all, one. I asked you for 2, so give me one more top hit. Can you give me one more from your catalog for the listeners who, like me, want to just hear one other good one?
Oh my gosh. We have so many, and
you have a lot about like, I like some of the ones around sympathy cards you do.
Oh yeah. Thank you for reminding me. Empathy cards are a big thing that we do. And so we have a couple, like our best selling empathy card is just really simple. It's white and it has black, like a sort of black stop sign shaped graphic on the front, and in white letters. It's very kind of stark, not flowery. It says, "There is no good card for this. I'm so sorry."
Oh.
And that became the title of the book that I wrote with Kelsey Crowe. That's the guidebook for like how to show up when you would rather hide behind a tree because you're scared of what to say. And that is just, it's turned out to be applicable to so many situations when you are like, someone died or someone, this awful thing that you're like, there's nothing, there's no card, there's no piece of paper that I can give to somebody that reflects the depth of my feeling about that. Like you're just like, so being able to say like, there is no good card for this, is a way to say that in a tangible thing that you can give to somebody.
It's amazing because I'm presuming that I don't know how old the greeting card industry is. Do you might? Is like 50 years old or 100 years old or something?
I should really know this. 30s, I want to say.
1930s. So it probably was created to do exactly what you're doing today, which is bridge all these inarticulatable emotions to people who, most of us, who can't quite articulate them. And then, you get a nice birthday card. And at the top, it says, Dear Neil. At the bottom, it says, Love, Mom. And then there might be a couple little sentences written in. But really, the sort of poem was written by somebody else.
Yes.
Yeah. And then here you are bridging the gap today, which is all these cards articulating things that we want to say, but don't have a way to say them.
Yeah.
And then I'm assuming in the future, it's the Joaquin Phoenix character in Her who writes the personalized greeting cards.
It's just all memes. I don't know.
Have you seen that movie?
I have. Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
that movie made me cry, and it's like one of my favorite movies.
I have to say I fell asleep in the middle.
Oh no!
But I fall asleep in the middle of everything, so it's not a reflection on that movie.
That sounds exactly like my wife Leslie's rating system for movies. You know how like Roger Ebert and Siskel and Ebert used to do the whole like 2 thumbs up, 1 thumb up, 2 thumbs down?
Yeah.
Okay, my wife's is 2 eyes open, 1 eye open, or 2 eyes closed.
Totally
literally,
relate.
like she like came home from a movie the other. She's like with a friend. She's like, it was a 2 eyes open movie. Hence / I stayed awake the entire time.
I can fully relate to that.
Yeah, there needs to be a card. Maybe you could help me with this, from her to me when we rent together a 2-hour movie, and I watch the last 1 hour and 57 minutes alone. Can you think of a card for that by the end of this show?
I will try. That's
I fell asleep.
Yeah.
Can you summarize
it doesn't
what happened?
reflect my feelings for you.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Or I'll read the Wikipedia plot profile so we can talk about it tomorrow. Emily, thank you so much for doing this. This is so fun. It was really, really exciting for me to hear what your 3 most formative books were. And I find you fascinating. I find your work fascinating. I find the products you make so interesting. And so I was like, what's driving you? What is forming you? What is creating this person I see in front of me? And you were kind enough to share them. So let's jump into your books, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay. Book number 1 is The Liars Club, a memoir by Mary Karr. It was published in 1995 by Viking Penguin. And according to the back, it was like on the top 10 books of the year list by like everybody, People, Time, The New Yorker, Entertainment Weekly. Most of those magazines I think are still around. Some of them are not. And the summary is a wickedly funny account of an apocalyptic childhood. Time magazine says, Mary Karr's god-awful childhood has a calamitous appeal. The choice in the book is between howling misery and howling laughter, and the reader veers toward laughter. Karr has survived to write a drop-dead reply to the simple question, Ma, what was it like when you were a little kid? Stephen King, trumpeted the virtues of this book in his book on writing, and his summary says, this is the real deal, funny, painful, and hotter than Texas in September. It's what the memoir is supposed to be. Lastly, before I hand it over to you to tell us about your relationship with it, I want to just call out the fact that the 20-year edition of The Liars Club came out very recently, a couple years ago, and Lena Dunham was chosen to write the foreword. And so I was like fascinated by that. So I read the foreword, and I'm just going to read, just before I hand it over, a paragraph from this foreword. So it's a foreword inside the new version of The Liars Club, and it was published in the Paris Review. Lena Dunham says, Mary Karr has not just made telling the truth her stock in trade, she has made it her art. As Karr describes her childhood, near comic in its unrelenting tragedy, she sends an essential message. Not only will the truth set you free, it will set a course for others to do the same. For a certain group of 20-something women, consumption of and passion for the Liars Club is both a rite of passage and a mode of self-identification. The expression oversharing is made for the girls, the people who have read Mary and taken her cue. She's allowed for the release of complex feelings, the use of unorthodox language, the poetry of pain to become part of young female friendships. Even those yet to read this book are still benefiting from its many reverberations. Emily, tell us about your relationship with The Liars Club.
So this book was I went to college in 1994. So I was a freshman in college when this book came out. And I was trying to figure out, as everyone is in college, like who you are and what you want to do with your life. And I was an English major, a creative writing major. And one of the things that this book is sort of credited with doing is kickstarting the sort of modern memoir movement.
3 M's.
Meaning
that was
fourth M, memoirs written by people who are not famous, like written for the story and not like a biography. Right. Like you're not Eleanor Roosevelt talking about the White House.
Lee Iacocca talking about Chrysler.
You're just like a lady from Texas talking about her crazy childhood. Right. And for me, so I came from kind of a crazy childhood, not like Mary Carr's childhood was, very differently crazy, but mine was not easy. And it was, my parents had split up when I was young, not much of a relationship with my dad, difficult relationship with my mom. And I really felt, I didn't understand when I went off to college and I left, I went to Minnesota for school and I grew up in Boston, and there was definitely like an element of like, get me out of here. I'm just going to go far away and be a person, an adult by myself over here. And I had not really, up until this point, seen somebody transform pain into humor in the same way, in a way that I resonated with so much as a person. And it felt to me like it was like an illustration of like, oh, like you could do this, like not necessarily like you can write this beautifully or you can, but this is like a thing. So here is this woman who had this crazy childhood and like, look what she did with it. And there are things to learn from it, and there are things to share, and there's ways to talk about it. And like, it sort of blew open for me this idea of turning pain and life experience into art, I mean, for lack of a better term, art. I'm using art. I'm not saying my work is art, but I'm saying that was what it meant for me.
And your work, I think your work is art.
Well, thank you.
Totally beautiful art.
Questionable, but.
No, but I see the groceries and shit bag, and it's beautiful.
Groceries and shit bag, man, that is like.
I think it really is art. I genuinely mean that. So keep going. So in the story, Mary Carr has, her mother's been married, I think something like 7 times, including twice to her father.
Right.
There's some violence in the book. There is some trauma, and you saw some parallels.
Yeah. And again, it's not as intense as what she describes in this book. But my mom really suffered with depression, and was a single mom, and she was an artist, and she just really had a hard time being a mom. And my parents split up when I was 5, and he was not a huge part of our lives. And my sister and I actually used to joke that he wasn't our biological father, because he was like an alien. Like he was like, we couldn't figure out, you couldn't draw a line between him and us the way that my mom, with all of the stuff that she was, you could still draw a very clear line between her and us. And that just wasn't the case with my dad. And then we ended up finding out later, much, much later, like college age, that that he wasn't our biological father, that my mom was inseminated as part of a pilot program through Harvard Medical School, through her OBGYN at the time in Cambridge. Wow. And it was before they kept any records. Like it was like before that you could pay to do it. It was just like a thing that they were trying to figure out, like if it worked. And so nobody was like writing it down.
You mean there was no?
No, like there was no like, hey, we're going to like just write the name of the guy whose sperm it is down. Like they didn't do that.
Harvard did not do that.
Harvard did not do that.
Because artificial insemination was not a thing yet?
It wasn't there was no laws about it, right? And so, but you would think like common sense would be like, we're going to make people. So maybe we should just like keep track of this a little bit because we might want this information like someday in the future.
Sorry, can you do a 30-second on, so what era was this at Harvard Medical School they were doing this?
This was the mid-70s.
So mid-70s, Harvard Medical School piloting a version of artificial insemination?
Yes.
And your mom volunteered to be part of the study group?
Yes. So my parents had tried to have kids for a long time, weren't able to, and they thought it was her for, 8 years, and finally tested my dad, and it turned out my dad couldn't father children. And so my mom, in order to have children, she just had, they both went to MIT, they met at MIT, and so they were in Cambridge, and her doctor was just part of this Harvard Medical School network. And so my mom volunteered to be, kind of a guinea pig in this experimentation that they were doing, because they were doing it successfully. And so interestingly, so we didn't know this growing up. And the reason we didn't know it is because my dad had so much shame around the fact that he couldn't father children, that part of the deal with their divorce is that that my mom could never tell anyone. And it was so interesting because my parents were in court for many years fighting. My dad wanted to pay less child support and he wanted less custody. And if at any point he'd raised his hand and said, they're not my kids, like do a DNA test, the court would have sided with him because there were no laws. But he didn't. And it was all about pride and shame and like not being a man and like all of that kind of stuff. And so my mom's lawyer, my mom kind of lived in fear for like 20 years that he would suddenly say like, I'm not paying child support anymore. They're not my kids. Do a test. But he never did. And it was more based on, I'm pretty sure that it was more based on like shame than like doing the right thing, because he really fought hard in court to not pay child support and to not have custody. And then he was not a part of our lives, and he moved to the UK when I was 15, and I didn't see him. The last time I saw him, I was 20. So it was 2 decades, and he passed away last year. So So it was all that. So my mom just never told anyone. Like my mom's lawyer knew, and one of her sisters knew, and that was it.
No way.
Yeah.
So and you guys did eventually find out.
And so we found out when we were in college, when my sister graduated from college, because their deal, and this is where so we were talking about health insurance earlier, their deal was that my dad had this corporate job and my mom was an artist. And so you couldn't get individual health insurance in America then. And so that my dad would pay our health insurance through his company policy, until my sister graduated from college.
All right.
And so then as soon as that was done, we were like financially free of that. And my mom could tell us, because if she had told us, she was afraid that if she told us before, that he would stop paying our health care, and then we would have no way to get health care. How
did she tell you?
She took us out to dinner at my sister's college graduation, and said,
she at the graduation. It's like she's like,
now I can tell. Like it was literally like countdown.
She's been holding this in.
Oh yeah. It was like literally the moment. Like my sister had graduated 1 hour before. And
oh my gosh.
She sat us down and said, and I don't remember her exact words, but she said, and I think it was just, your father is not your biological father. And for me, it was like, oh my God, everything makes so much more sense. Like it was just like putting together all of these things in my life that had never made sense before were suddenly like, oh, okay, like now there's so much that I get. And my sister had a slightly different reaction. Like she was confused. Like she was more upset than I was, I think, just because she had more invested in the family being kind of not a mess,
a unit.
Yeah. And I had given up on that idea a long time ago. So for me, it was like a relief. It was like, oh, okay. Like now I get it. Like now all of this makes so much more sense.
And what was your first question?
So I remember my sister's, it was what, like, I just remember saying like, my sister's first question was, because my mom said, she went on to say, I was inseminated as part of this program, Harvard Medical School. And the donors at the time were med students and professors who were just furthering their own research.
Oh my gosh.
And so
I can't believe
because they
that.
weren't bringing in outside people because it was like not really, they weren't really talking about doing it. They were
Oh
still
my
just kind of doing it
gosh.
internally. And so my sister's first question was, you mean like I could potentially marry my brother and not know it? That's so gross. And I was like, what? Like, who are you? That makes no sense. Like, that's your first question? And we assumed actually, because this was in like 1999, like we assumed that we were half sisters because we were 2.5 years apart.
Oh.
And we just figured like,
Two
different guys, like,
Yeah.
2.5 years apart. And then when 23andMe and all that, they sequenced the genome and we could get our DNA tested.
Sorry, you skimmed over that 23andMe.
23andMe.com it's a place where you can get your DNA tested,
so
right?
You guys did this.
So we did this.
Mhm.
Once it was available. You can do it for like, $100. And it turns out we're full sisters.
Wow.
So we probably do have a lot of half siblings. Because they were not like tracking.
What do you mean have a lot of half siblings?
Meaning this guy that donated, the odds are that it wasn't just me and my sister.
Right.
Because we were 2.5 years apart.
Right. So 2.5 years your mom went back.
Yeah. But in the interim,
yeah,
however many people had been in there. And
sorry to say this, and this is going to sound so strange, but like you said, it's like the professors or,
yeah.
Like it's almost like you picture like this one professor running this like crazy experiment.
Well, seriously.
Under the cover of like, under before any laws.
Yes.
He's maybe sired 700 children.
I know, it's so bizarre. And actually, so we're in this database for donor children because this was happening at a few different hospitals around the country and universities, right, at the same time.
Yeah.
So there's this like lost generation. It's like, there's several thousand of us that were born between like 1970 and 1980 before they started regulating
so it's
it.
10 years that went by.
Almost. Like
Yeah, but there's a lot of people.
72, 73,
So
and
amazing
1980.
that you even have a resource and you've started entering data into that.
Yeah. And so there's all these, so everybody's uploaded their DNA results and been like, hey, like if you match, like looking for half siblings, like maybe we have the same dad. And I've had.
What is the website?
Gosh,
like for anyone listening who may actually,
I can't remember if it's donor. I don't remember because they
tell
only.
You what, you send it to me after. We'll add to the show notes.
Yeah.
So if in the remote chance someone's listening to this and they're like, oh my gosh, there's a way that could relate to me.
Yeah, because they said
great to share
they only
that.
send me. I don't go there and check it. They only send me a thing if they have a thing. So that's why I don't.
Have you got any?
Yeah. So interestingly, one thing that you can do because you say who your mom's doctor was and the hospital that they were at and the year. And so I've been contacted by 3 people who thought like, hey, maybe we are half siblings because my mom had the same doctor. My mom was at the same clinic in the same year. And we kind of look alike and like, and because you have to ask someone to share DNA. So they've reached out to me and said like, let's compare DNA. And I've been like, yeah, let's do it. And none of them have been related to me, but they've all been really cool. And like, and actually one of them found out 3 months ago that the head of the department is her biological father, the former head of the OBGYN department.
Is that guy still alive?
Yes, he's still alive and they met.
Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
So I think that she's talking about doing a thing.
So you've picked the Liars Club. No.
Coming back to the book.
No. I'm not saying that you have been deviating. Actually, it's totally related. Like this is it's a story about you. I sense from you, Emily, you swim in the bath of these massive emotions because you have these experiences. You just shared a massive one, and I'm gonna add a lead into the front of this, but you went through Hodgkin's lymphoma at a young age. Did I say that right?
Yep.
At a young age, you've had experiences with the loss of a very close friend. You have this company now that navigates directly into this sea of articulating these really hard to articulate emotions. It's fascinating to me that this is.
Yeah.
And also that can I just say you're super grounded about it all. Like you're telling the world this in a really comfortable way. We can obviously change anything if you aren't comfortable after, but I'm sensing from you have your eyes are a bit wet. You're processing it a lot, but I also sense that you have gotten to such a good place of.
I've had a lot of therapy. I mean, I've really done a lot of work in different ways, and I've struggled with depression. Another big thing I think that informs what I do now and my formative self is that I've struggled with depression since I was like 10. And I got put on Prozac when it came out, which is when I was 11.
Oh my gosh.
And I, have been on some kind of psych meds for my whole life since then.
Yeah.
And I'm totally cool with the idea that I'll be on them forever, but I have had a lot of experience with kind of navigating that world and talking to people about it. And I am like a big mental health advocate person. And like, so all the weird stuff, like, I don't know. I for a long time have been pretty comfortable with like talking about the stuff that is sometimes is hard to talk
Well,
about.
on behalf of the whole world, we are so grateful to you for having that strength and courage, because people like me, I think of myself as a pretty sensitive dude. Like I'm quite emotive with my loved ones. I say I love you when I hang up the phone with all my guy friends. I like really like, I'm really.
I mean, that's serious business.
I'm
like,
I'm
that's
like,
good.
I'm putting myself out there, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I always figure I do that because for the 98 out of 100 who will not reciprocate, the 2 that do, we go deep, and it's beautiful, and it means incredible relationships, like the kind of relationship I'm trying to grow with the show, but also in my family and my friendships, and it's amazing. And yet, when I'm exposed to your stories and your work, I get resonance back from them that is like a new growth emotionally for me. So
I love that.
Yeah, totally. I can totally see that. I love your stuff. And so I, therefore, am so thankful that you have done all that therapy and that you have developed such rich self-awareness, because it informs all of us who are just learning how to navigate and articulate really these huge emotions we have that we haven't. I can't even articulate half the stuff that I see on your greeting cards or on your bag, but I'm like, yes, that's exactly the emotion. Thank you for someone telling, like, thank you for telling me what it was. So thank you, and thank you to Mary Carr, because clearly,
thank you, Mary Carr.
Well, because clearly the Lowry Club has been so formative for you.
It was really, I reread it in preparation for this, and it was like, and there was a lot about it that I didn't remember from having read it however many years ago, 95, and it was great. Like it held up, and it was it's
amazing.
It's a great book.
I mean, I don't always say that on the show, but this book was like captivating.
Yeah,
and as you say, the fact that she wasn't famous actually makes it even better. Because if she was famous, that'd be part of the story. But here it's like, I'm not famous. Here's my story. And it's like, I think about Let's Pretend This Never Happened by Jenny Lawson.
Yeah.
Hyperbole and a Half by Ali Broche.
Yep.
I just did an interview with Sarah Anderson of Sarah Scribbles. And she's like talking about Ali Broche. You can see these linkages. Lena Dunham is saying, like, I think all kind of classic modern day memoirs are kind of drawn from this work.
I agree. I think there was biography and there were memoirs that were about a famous person or somebody who had done something that, the world would see as quote unquote remarkable, but not just here is a story of my crazy life told in such a way that is entertaining and relatable and meaningful. And that is going to make people want to read it.
I love it. It's an incredible book. Thank you so much. Who should read it? Who would you recommend read it now?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I mean, I kind of think everybody should read it. I think especially if you are a person who is interested in storytelling and is thinking about ways to tell your own story or thinking about just how to navigate that. Like, I think like for me, it was so important, in that way. And I don't know, like that's a tough thing because it feels like that particular connection was super personal. So I don't know, like, I feel like it's hard for me to be like, hey, if you like this, you'll love that, but I don't know. I mean,
we always say on 3 Books that humans are the best algorithm.
Right.
And so we've taken your very humid recommendation of this book. Now we're just being a little greedy, saying like who specifically, but you're saying storytellers, truth tellers, wanting to articulate yourself. Like, however, do not read it if you're like me in the process of writing a memoir, because then you'll be like totally like, whoa, this is so good. And I don't think I could ever do something like this good. But let me read a paragraph to close our conversation here before we go to the next book. Chapter 3. I'm just going to read a paragraph just to give listeners a little view into how honest this book really is. Chapter 3. And her grandmother has just died. Okay. I had this succinct way of explaining the progression of my grandmother's cancer to neighbor ladies who asked. First, they took off her toenail, then her toe, then her foot. Then they shot mustard gas through her leg till it was burnt black. and she screamed for 6 weeks nonstop. Then they took off her leg, and it was like a black stump laid up on a pillow. When we came to see her, she called Lisa by the wrong name. Then she came home, and it went to her brain, so she went crazy, and ants were crawling all over her arm. And then she died. At the end of this report, Lisa and I would start scanning around whoever's kitchen it was for cookies or Kool-Aid. We knew with certain instinct that reporting on a dead grandma deserved some payoff. After a while, Lisa even learned to muster some tears, which could jack up the ante as high as a popsicle. I mean, like,
Yeah.
you can't read that and be like horrified and laughing at the same time.
Right.
The whole book's like that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What
It's
a great
because
book.
it's like a horrifying story, but it's also the way that she tells it makes it really relatable. So
I can't relate to that, but yeah, at the same time,
I mean,
it's like,
but you can
the
relate to
kid
like
trying
the
to get,
kid.
like,
You
trying
can
to get
relate to like the
cookies.
emotion of like,
Totally.
oh, I've been there where I've been like trying to manipulate an adult into like giving me a popsicle, and I sort of know that this is like not great. Like that maybe the thing I'm saying is not, great, but
Yeah.
so yeah. I just
We agree.
I just think she's great.
It's an amazing book. I don't know, and she's got a sequel to it too, right? Called
Yes,
Cherry, isn't it? Or
Cherry.
Lit. Cherry, right?
Yes.
And so that's also, I mean,
Yeah. And we went
mentioned.
to the same undergraduate,
Where?
McAllister in Minnesota.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. And I read at the back. I don't know if the copy I have is out of date, but that she's a professor at Syracuse.
Oh, is she? I don't know.
That I don't know, but I also know that George Saunders is a professor at Syracuse, whose book I just read, Lincoln in the Bardo,
Oh.
which just won the Man Booker Prize. It was a really fascinating book. So there's something going on in Syracuse. Maybe I
Yeah.
should do a 3 Books roadshow over there one day.
Totally.
See if I could scoop up some interviews. Okay, your second book is Bird by Bird, Some Instructions on Writing and Life by Anne Lamott. It's published in 1994 by Anchor Books, a division of Random House. The back, I really should read this to give people a view. Of course, the category is writing. Here's the back of the book. 30 years ago, my older brother, who was 10 years old at the time, was trying to get a report on birds written that he'd had 3 months to write. It was due the next day. We were out at our family cabin in Bolinas, and he was at the kitchen table close to tears, surrounded by binder paper and pencils and unopened books on birds, immobilized by the hugeness of the task ahead. Then my father sat down beside him, put his arm around my brother's shoulder, and said, "Bird by bird, buddy. Just take it bird by bird." Tell us about your relationship with Bird by Bird, Some Instructions on Writing and Life by Anne Lamott.
So this was another college book for me. And when you sit down, and bless you if you can do this. I don't know. I'm really curious if you can do this. I personally cannot sit down and have the thought, I'm going to write a book, because it sends me into like a panic attack. Like I can sit down and say, I'm going to write a greeting card, or I'm going to write a page, or I'm going to write like 2 pages. But to like sit down and say, I'm going to write a book is like, it doesn't work. I don't think it works for anybody.
Right. I agree with that.
And when I was a creative writing major, I knew that I wanted to do creative writing. Like I knew that was like, okay, this is what I want to do. But I really didn't know how to get from like point A to point B. Like I didn't really know any writer. Like I was, 20, 19. I didn't really know how it worked, like the functional, like just the what it was like to do this. And all I could think about when I thought about writing was, I want to write a book, and then, oh God, like writing a book sounds horrible. Like how could you ever climb that mountain? Like how could you do that? And this book was actually taught in a creative writing class that I took, and it really breaks it down in a way that is understandable to somebody who is just kind of learning about writing and learning about how to write and learning about how one would go about doing this kind of thing. And so it was really meaningful for me at that point in my life.
And she feeds in thank you for sharing that how that became formative to you. And she also like has an almost unsettlingly anxious view of writing in a way, like not anxious, but like the oppression you just said you felt when like sitting down to write a book she feeds into that emotion so much in this book.
Totally. And
The difficulty of it, the challenge of it, the hardness of it, the way you don't want to do it. Like, if you can relate to any of those emotions while writing, this is the perfect book for you, because it's like feeds all those anxieties.
It is. And it also made me feel like there's nothing wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I could still be a writer. Like, look at this successful writer who's writing about writing. And she is writing about having all these feelings, and she still is able to make, and not only is she still able to write a great book, but she uses them as fuel to write her book. And she, you know, talks about ways that she works around them. And she talks about like how to exist with these feelings at the same time as she's writing. And for me, it was like, oh, okay. So you don't just have to be like, hello, I'm confident writer lady. Like, and as a 20-year-old, you know, I really didn't know, what like kind of what I was getting into, you know, and to have somebody and to have someone who did talk so much about the anxiousness and the questioning of like whether you have it, or like are all the good ideas taken, or, you know, or is my best work behind me, and am I never going to have another idea ever again? And that and feeling and seeing like, okay, if this successful person is feeling these things, then I'm cool. Like then I can do this, you know?
And you pointed out something that we didn't really explain, but Anne Lamott was and is a very successful novelist. So she's written a ton of books.
She's written a ton of
books, and many of them have done very well. And it's like almost like you're saying it would be the equivalent of Meryl Streep doing like a inside the actor's studio type thing, where she's like, I panic before every time I'm on set. I really have trouble like rehearsing my lines. I have to like tape things to my mirror. It's really embarrassing.
Right.
Like, imagine you saw that side of Meryl Streep. I mean, I'm just making up because Meryl Streep's been like nominated for everything. But like, that's kind of what this book does. It demystifies it from someone who's successful,
right,
giving you permission to do something that everyone knows is inherently challenging, but looks easy when you see everyone else's finished draft.
Exactly. And it breaks it down in that way. And it's funny because this was another one that I reread, right, in preparation for this. And it's been sitting on my shelf for 20 years, but I haven't read it since college. And it was funny because reading it now, after I've done this a lot, you know, not nearly as much as she has, but I've done some writing, and I've done, you know, I've had a little bit of success in that. The second half of the book, I'm thinking like, oh my God, she's really making this out to be so like it was funny because the thing that was so comforting to me at that time didn't resonate with me as much now. But at the time, it was so necessary for me to see that from someone like her.
That's so funny you say that, because like actually that's exactly my biggest gripe with the book. And I almost wasn't going to mention it because I was like, I'm going to sound a bit snooty saying I do not relate to all these anxieties. But I also can't really watch Curb Your Enthusiasm. Because I find
Me too.
That you're the same.
I hate Curb Your Enthusiasm. You're the only other person I know. I mean,
really? I just can't watch it. And I don't know if I love it or hate it, because I've not made it past 5 minutes of that show, because I'm like, it provokes so much anxiety inside
that's
me.
what it makes. So this is why I hate it. I don't hate it because I'm like, oh, Larry David's awful. I hate it because it's so uncomfortable for me to watch it and for me, and some people are like, I love that. I love being uncomfortable. And for me personally, entertainment is not like, I have enough anxiety. I don't need my entertainment to provoke more anxiety and discomfort. So I'm just like, no, you know, like I'm going to go have my entertainment in another way. I appreciate this show for like how whatever it hits in me that does that. Like that's amazing. And like that it evokes that response in people. And some people are like, yes, more of that, bring it on. And I'm personally like, no, dude, get that away, you know?
Totally. And that's great. We can relate to that. Cause like, yes, as Bird by Bird goes into these anxiety provoking sort of, what's the word for like things we have in our head, like before writing, it totally appeals to someone who's having challenges with that. Yet at the same time, if you are what you're doing, you're like confidently writing these beautiful, cards and bags and all this stuff that you're putting online and out there, and you've written this book, you might go through a period of increased confidence as a writer, in which case reading a book like this is like a bit destabilizing. Like I almost go into a bit of a tricky headspace when I write, which is I go into a bit of a super confident headspace, not my real headspace, but like I trick my brain into like, I can write.
Yep.
I'm a good writer. I feel like I mentally picture like almost like a gorilla over like a tiny keyboard. Like I have this visualization, which gives me strength to do it.
Yeah.
And her angle is the opposite, which is breaking it down like almost like a from a challenge perspective.
Yeah.
And you have to go into one of those two headspaces. So sometimes if I go to the other one, I can't relate to this.
Totally. Yes. I feel like there are two sides of the same coin of like, you have to either just go into this super confident, like, I can do this. I'm not going to question this at every turn because then I would never make anything. Or you have to be in this sort of like, I'm going to question this at every turn and I'm still going to keep doing it. And it's ultimately going to be okay. But in the meantime, I'm going to have all this anxiety and like, freak out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. It's super interesting though to me.
And this book is like, I think I don't know if I'm going too far here, but it's if not then it's one of the 2 or 3 most popular books ever written on writing. Like if you go into the categories online of writing, this comes up all the time.
It's a really well-known one for sure.
It's a really well-known book. And in fact, on Goodreads, if you go into like quotes from the book, which, quotes from my book have like, 50 likes or whatever, 100, like all the quotes from this book have like thousands and thousands and thousands of likes. I'm like, whoa, these quotes really resonate with people. So here's a couple. Try looking at your mind as a wayward puppy that you are trying to paper train. You don't drop kick a puppy into the neighbor's yard every time it piddles on the floor. You just keep bringing it back to the newspaper.
Bird by bird.
Yeah, bird by bird. Okay, here's another one. You own everything that happened to you. Tell your stories. If people wanted you to write warmly about them, they should have behaved better.
Yeah, she has a whole like what to do, how to handle libel, section at the end, like of this book.
You agree with that? If people wanted you to write warmly about them, they should have behaved better. That sounds a bit hard.
It's a bit hard. I think there's a little bit of hyperbole in there, but I think, but no, I mean, that's a tough one. I think it depends on the person, and it depends on all that. But if I had to say like a black and white yes or no, do I agree? I would probably say no.
Okay, well, we've got 2 perfect like lines from these formative books to what you're doing today, Emily. I'm really curious to see if you can link the last one to your work, because I found this third book so unsettling. Okay, it's called The Book of Shrigley by David Shrigley, published in 2005 by Chronicle Books. At the back of the book, it says, darkly hilarious scrawls that tell the truth about bad-tempered pets, strange attractions, works, sex, art, knitting, wrestling, and a host of other everyday activities. The Guardian calls this book like a psychotic version of Simpsons creator Matt Groening's Life in Hell cartoons. David Shrigley is a 50-year-old British visual artist known for his subversive, humorous art that brings modern art cliches crashing down to earth. For example, in Trafalgar Square, on I guess a pillar that was supposed to hold like an equestrian statue of William IV, he put up, with permission, a statue called Really Good, which was just a huge fist with a giant elongated thumb pointing up. He's also designed a football team mascot. He's done music videos with Blur. He designed a London Underground leaflet, and he does a weekly cartoon in The Guardian. These are crazy, sharp, biting pieces of pop art. Tell us about your relationship with the Book of Shrigley.
So to me, it's funny because there's a super clear through line in what I do here. And this book was given to me by a good friend in 2006, which was when I was still working in advertising. And I, one of the things so when I was growing up, I couldn't decide. So I was always kind of having to choose between being a writer and being an illustrator, like being a writer and being an artist. Mm-hmm. And I gravitated one of the reasons I gravitated towards being a writer is because my mom is an incredibly talented artist. Like she is, I think she's a visionary. I think she's amazingly talented. And my sister,
what kind of art?
She makes quilts. She makes art quilts.
Oh,
she was
cool.
sort of one of the pioneers of the art quilt movement, and she has taught all over the world and written 8 books and
wow,
has her work in museums, and she's amazing. And my sister is a really talented illustrator who did go to art school and ultimately is not an illustrator now, but is very talented. And so I always felt like, I love illustrate, like I love the language, visual language, but I'm not Picasso. I don't have as much raw talent in that direction as they do. And so I always felt like I love design and I love art, but I'm not like an artistic genius. And then, but I loved it. And then when I got into advertising, I ended up starting out as an art director. You can either be as a creative, right? You can either be an art director or a writer. And as it happened, I got a scholarship to go to ad school, which kind of sent me on that path. And there was an assignment for a writer, and there was an assignment for an art director, and you could pick which one to do. And the writer assignment was super hard. It was like write a 60-second radio spot for something. And the art director assignment was way easier. It was about doing print ads for winter tourism in Minnesota. Just marker comps.
You find that easy. Not everybody would.
Well,
find
for me,
advertising.
between those two things, given those two choices,
I'm just making a joke about Minnesota here.
But like, given those two choices for me, I was like, oh, definitely that. Well, like no, I'm not going to write a radio. Like writing a radio, and still writing a radio commercial is super hard. And so I ended up winning this scholarship to school as an art director.
Wait, what did you do in the ad?
Oh, I did a lot. It was like I sent them like 15 things, and they were they were just crappy like visuals, whatever. That was, but. Anyway, I felt like this was an easier assignment. So, and I wasn't going to go to school unless I got a scholarship. So I was like, okay, what's my best chance here? Because I don't know if I want to be a writer or an art director, because I kind of like both, and I love both. And so I ended up being an art director, which I was for the first 4 years of my career, and then I switched to being a writer and the creative director for the second half of it. And this book. This David Shrigley book and David Shrigley's work, I'd not been familiar with him prior to my friend giving me this book. And it was really like a slap in the face of like, hello, you don't have to be Renoir to be like, you don't have to be good at art to be good at art. Yeah, exactly. Like you don't have to be quote unquote good at art. Like you don't have to be a technical master to have something to say visually and be able to say it visually.
Wow.
And so for me, it was like, oh my God, like, wait a minute, here's this guy who's doing both. Like he's writing.
These drawings are like super
ugly. He's doing these like super
they're...
ugly, weird drawings, right? And
it's like stick figures. There's like, I flipped open to page 52. There's just like all these scribbly circles. And at the circle, it says, there's like a stick figure of a man. And it says, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Pete is also at the end of the tunnel. Like it's hilarious. It's randomly funny.
Weird,
yeah, it's so funny and weird.
But
There's
it was
like this dude at the end of the tunnel.
So it's this guy.
Or how about this one? Giant yellow sign with black letters, like a speed sign on a highway. It just says, no speed limit anymore. Go as fast as you want. Like in Germany.
It's just random. But it was like the fact that this guy had a book, like that this was this guy's career. And it was like, this is genius and weird and strange. And I've never seen anything like it. And I want to do this. Like this is like, I don't want to pick, because you had to pick in my career in advertising, you had to pick being a writer or an art director. And I always felt like this pull to both.
The tyranny of the or instead of the...
but I wasn't, I didn't feel like adequate as an artist. Like I never felt like I could go there as an artist. And so this was like, wait a minute, like this guy is just making these crazy drawings, but because of the writing and because of the insight and because of like just his weirdness, these are successful. Like this is an awesome thing that I want to look at.
And even the word success there is totally objective, because who knows how he defines success.
Oh, totally.
But like these might not sell. I mean, I
have no idea. Like,
I had never heard of this book. I don't know how many of our listeners will have heard of it, but it was so formative to you. And like, that's what that guy, he's made a career out of it. As you said, like I'm looking at page 163. There's a drawing of a lady, stick figure, of course. Our teacher. At the bottom, it says, she never let us waste a single piece of paper. Obviously, ironically, printed on a piece of paper.
It's weird. I mean, it's weird. And I think when I said successful, I mean, it was successful to me. Like I looked at this and thought, this is like, I'm picking up what this guy's putting down, like whatever this is, like I'm into this, whatever this is. And I want to make my version of this. Like I want to go out in the world and like, this is showing me, here's some proof that this like thing, this job that I want to make up for myself is a thing, like
totally. It's beautiful that you articulate that way, because your work, like I did an interview with Sarah Anderson, who does Sarah Scribbles.
Yeah.
And, she's had 3 books in 3 years. It's a hugely popular, like, art. And one of her most formative books was Hyperbole and a Half
Yeah.
by Ali Broche.
Yep.
And I asked her why, and she said the exact same thing you said, because Ali taught me that it was okay. I was in art school in Maryland, and Ali taught me that it was okay not to be good at art to be good at art. Like the
Yeah.
drawings didn't have to be super fancy and ornate and like really clear and stylistically like professional. It could just be an incredible story and message told through art that was still funny and unique and interesting
Yeah.
and had a voice and a style. So it seems like you picked up that same type of messaging from this permission to be
Yes.
yourself.
Yeah.
It was like you just leaned into a part of yourself a little bit more because you saw someone else do that.
Right. And had confidence that like that I could do it. Like had confidence that like just because I was not, you know, an art school trained illustrator, or a master at painting, or, you know, a visionary artist, like quote unquote visionary, like what you think of when, you know, you think of a amazing painter.
Yeah, and I'm actually wondering, I'd love to just explore a theme with you a little bit. I was just checking to make sure we had the time. Which is that you grew up underneath an extremely successful artist, your mom.
Yeah.
Right? You mentioned she had a number of books published. You mentioned she had her work displayed in galleries. So can I ask, there's a theme there for me that I'm interested in, which is like, if you're a successful parent in some topic or some area, doctor, whatever,
Mhm.
how do you raise kids to not feel oppressed by your success?
I think she actually did a really good job at that. I think there's a few things that she did. She actually she was making really groundbreaking work from the time that I was a little kid, but she didn't become financially successful until I was in high school. And so we were really broke growing up, and we lived in this really wealthy community, and I was a total jerk about it. Like I was really we were buying our clothes at rummage sales and drinking powdered milk, and like, you know, and I really felt like, why can't you go get a job? You know, when I was in like elementary school, like my friend's mom works at Jordan Marsh, which was like a department store, and she gets all these free clothes. Like, and I have to get my clothes at, you know, like a rummage sale. And like, and I just felt like so much less than, you know, and I felt like, and I didn't at the time, you know, when I was little, I wasn't seeing her. I wasn't mature enough to be like, cool, she's an artist. Like, this is amazing, this thing that she's trying to do. I was just more like, why are we not like the other people? You know, like why are we not normal? And I think that, you know, she really struggled, and she was really honest about her struggles. Like, and she was a single mom, and it was like really clear to see her struggles. And she very much, you know, said like, don't do this, like, don't do this, you know, like, and she did it because she's a person who like has to make art, and it's more of a part of her. I think that's more of a part of her than it even is a part of me. But she also just really encouraged creativity. Like she was, you know, we weren't allowed to have coloring books because they weren't creative enough. Like she wanted us to be drawing our own thing, you know, and like it wasn't like, oh, this thing is good or bad or like whatever, but she felt like, you know, no, like a coloring book is like telling you what to do. Wow. And I don't want you doing stuff with things that are telling you what to do. Yeah. And, you know, we had a kiln for a while in the basement, and we used to do clay, and we used to do like, and it was just
that's a good title for your memoir.
Kiln in the basement.
Yeah. Don't you think?
Yeah.
And also because when you say it over like a radio interview, it'd be like, yeah, my memoir, Kiln in the Basement. It sounds like It sounds like
Killing in the Basement. Yeah.
Like my husband, the horror screenwriter.
Totally.
Yeah.
But yeah, she really encouraged creativity, and always felt like I never felt judged. Like I never felt like it's not good. Like all of my judgment was internal. Like it was all like, oh, this isn't good enough. I was a super perfectionist kid. Like, you know, and so it was all me. But she really, she never set it up as like a competition, you know? So I never felt like the oppression of her success. It was just more like, I want to do my own thing. That's a different thing.
Cool.
You know?
That's great. I appreciate you kind of letting me go into that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the people I interview on the show have a degree of success and a theme that I'm thinking about in my own life. And I think a lot of us do, which is like this balance between ambition and contentment.
Yeah.
So how hard do you push one way, and what do you sacrifice in the other? Is it a balance? Is it a flywheel that creates energy? You know, just wrestling with those emotions. So as the show keeps going and the chapters keep going, like I want to open that theme up a little bit because I don't want to start asking people.
I think that's great. I would love to hear, because that's the thing that I'm wrestling with a lot, and my husband wrestles with a lot, and we talk about a lot just in the concept in the context of living in Los Angeles, where its ambition sort of drives the city, and it's a lot, and contrasting that with the life of a lot of friends of ours who live in slower places and who just whose lives are very different, and thinking about ambition versus contentment. I mean, I think it's such a good question, and I would love to hear how other people answer it.
Well, let's do it. So you live in Los Angeles. People are migrating towards urban centers. The populations are rising in the Los Angeleses of the world, the San Franciscos, the Austins, the New York. In Toronto, where I live, in these cities, we have super wide stratification of wealth. You've got extreme wealth, and you've got tons of people that are not wealthy in all kinds of industries in the same cities, in the service industries and running the city, essentially. And you live in Los Angeles. Okay, you run a business. Your husband's a screenwriter. You're successful. At the same time, you're in the 10-mile zone. Like, you've got like,
oh yeah, we are like, it's hard to feel. I mean, that's the thing that we constantly have to be telling ourselves is like, this is not normal. Like, this is not this situation in which we're in, because we're in sort of a real estate thing where we're trying to buy a house and we can't. And
that's crazy.
It's because, and we own a house on the east side of town, but I have an hour plus drive to work. So we're trying to figure out, because we just changed offices, like how to do it and how to move closer. And we can't do it. And because we need $2 million for a house. And it's like, 80% of the people, I think the study that just came out, the income inequality is bananas, and the real estate market is bananas. And 80% of the people who live in Los Angeles County could not afford to buy a home in Los Angeles County anywhere in the county right now.
Wow.
And so people are leaving San Francisco, people are leaving San Francisco, and people are leaving Los Angeles who just can't sustain it. Like, and because you're in a position where you're in immense, what wealth buys you is proximity to your workplace. In these cities like LA and San Francisco, you don't have a commute. Like, anybody who can't afford to live near the West Side or near the tech, or and the tech is what's actually driven up the prices in LA, not entertainment.
Yeah.
And so you have a commute. You have an hour and a half commute in the car. So then you're like, okay, I'm trading 3 hours a day of my life in order to work over here, and I can't afford to live over here, and I'm not spending time with my family. I'm not, what am I doing?
And yet, by any perspective in the entire world, you're amongst the 0.0001%,
exactly.
the luckiest,
kind
of wealthiest, most successful, most educated people in the entire universe have ever
so it's
been.
Like you get so skewed by living in a place like this and feeling like, oh, like we can't make it. And then looking around and being like, no, like this isn't normal. This is not, this isn't a barometer of.
It's almost like we need the Shrigley book for life.
Yeah.
The Shrigley book gave you permission to create the art you wanted to, but didn't have the permission to do, right? What's the version of that in our world today that gives people permission to live and to recognize how lucky they are?
I think that's a really good question. I think, it's a lot of people having to let go of a story that's not serving them, which is really hard to do. Like, what your identity, like you grow up and you forge an identity for yourself, and you think like, well, these are the things that define me. Like, I need to be good at this, and I need to be, I need to have this kind of a job, and I need to do that, in order to feel good about myself and in order to feel successful. And at one point, maybe that story was served you in terms of like, it got you through school, or it got you to a certain place in your life that was great. And then, but that is not always. Your life shifts, and you priorities shift, and you shift. And sometimes when you're holding on to a story that's an old story, it's just because it's easy, and it's not because it's still actually serving you.
My mind is like trying to catch up to everything you
like,
said.
Does that make sense? Am I just like sounding like self-helpy and weird?
No. There's no book shame, no book guilt, no shame, no guilt. I love that we're going into these little holes, because it's driven off of your 3 most formative books. And it does, because I sometimes, I'm like trying to navigate into these themes. That's because this show is meant to talk about books, but really be talking about life. Like we're going to zoom up and down because that's what every single book we read does to us. It shakes and moves our soul, and we're going to go where the books take us. Speaking of books, as we kind of keep chat, I feel like I could talk to you all night. And I love listening to the way you articulate things because you have this emotional attunedness. What's the word? Like you're connected to the emotional side of life so nicely that it's great to just hear your description of how.
Thank you. That's just a really nice compliment.
Well, even just saying that what you just said, like Leslie and I always say to each other, we think we stole this phrase from Brené Brown, like. The story I'm telling myself is.
Yes, that's a Brené thing. Yeah,
that's a
totally.
Brené thing, right? Yep. So I think the example Brené uses, and I love this example, so I'll just share it for the listeners who are, on the show, I don't like to mention stuff for anybody that we don't explain. And so she says, hey, my mom's gonna come over for dinner tonight, and her husband says, oh, I won't be around.
Yeah.
And then she says something like, the story I'm telling myself is you don't want to have dinner with my mom. And he's like, oh no, I wish you would come tomorrow. I have hockey practice.
Right. Like there's a reason, like it has nothing to do, like you are ascribing that meaning in your own head.
And using that phrase is so empowering because you say the story I'm telling myself puts it on you. And then the other person gets to say face and say, no, it's actually not that. So Leslie and I are experimenting with using that. And it's actually pretty powerful.
Yeah.
When you actually get it out there, right? Like when you don't get caught in the heat of things.
Yeah.
So, okay. So let's go into the closing questions here. Because we've talked beautifully about, or I've heard you talk beautifully about The Liars Club by Mary Carr, Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott, and now The Book of Shrigley by David Shrigley. Good call. I should have called it the Book of Pasricha, not the Book of Awesome. Name it after yourself, and people might be able to pronounce it. So let's close up with a few questions about books. If you could delete it from your brain, what book would you most want to read again as if it was the first time?
Probably Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. It's a Buddhist book. I mean, yes, I live in Los Angeles, but sort of self-helpiness and spirituality has been a thing that I've been kind of playing in for maybe 5 years or so. And it's a thing that has helped me a lot. And I really wish that I'd found it earlier because I think that I could have avoided some suffering that was self-inflicted.
What's the name of the book again?
It's called Radical Acceptance.
Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach.
Yeah.
And I've heard circular mentions of this book. I think Tim Ferriss is a fan of it as well. Or he recommends her meditations, which is maybe how I heard about it. And so I think I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, check it out. It's great.
Okay, cool. I just remember there's another one. What's one thing books do for you that nothing else does?
Books, escapism, and like TV does not work for me for escapism. I get really distracted. I'm the worst. I'm a really bad TV watcher. And I actually I won't watch TV by myself.
It's nice to discover something you suck at.
So I have this weird thing, which is like the bane of Seth's existence because he writes for TV and movies. But I can't watch TV alone because I think it's too depressing. Like for me personally, I don't. So he has to wait for me to watch all of our shows and like all that stuff. And then I get distracted really easily and I lose focus. And like, even if it's like an awesome show, it happens. And with books, I am so much more focused.
It's like the two eyes open thing.
Yeah,
you distracted and there's a screen there. We look at screens all day. The average person's on their phone 4 or 5 hours a day. I have Moment on my cell phone. Moment is the app that tells you the next day how much time you're on your phone. I don't know if you have it.
I've thought about getting it, and like I should get it because I think it will help me not be on my phone.
So I got the message yesterday, the day before, Moment, and it told me that I was on my phone the day before for 10 hours and 19 minutes.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And
yet I can totally see like how that would happen.
It was a shocking thing to realize about myself. And TV is a beautiful, wonderful thing. But when I'm relating to you because when you read a book, you feel like you're turning off screens a little bit.
You are. And that's why I actually I have a Kindle and I read on my iPad and I have all those methods of reading. And like when you're traveling, it's great to bring a Kindle and not 5 paperbacks. But like I like paper for that reason.
No, the bag I have with me.
Yeah.
I put 10 books in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I almost feel like a bit of I feel pride in how heavy the bag is. You know what I mean? I'm like, this dented thing, kind of pinching my lower vertebrae is worth it. Anyway, And finally, my very last question. I promise this is really the last one. You play in a number of different fields. You know, you're a best-selling author. You got this incredible company with Emily McDowell. You're articulating, I think, these emotions that we have not yet articulated to ourselves. I love your work, and you've achieved an incredible amount of success. So, can you look back and share a piece or two of hard-learned wisdom for anyone aspiring into the industries or worlds that you currently live in? I left it vague on purpose.
Yes. There's a couple things. Not everyone is going to like you. And you can't make work from the perspective of trying to make everyone like you, because they want it's never going to happen. You know, there's an Neil Brennan, the comedian. I listened to a podcast episode of Hilarious World of Depression where he told a story. He was talking about.
That's the name of the podcast?
Yeah, it's a great podcast.
Okay.
Hilarious World of Depression.
I'm
It's
so
awesome.
glad you told us. Yeah.
So he was telling a story about self-judgment and all that kind of stuff. And he said, if you go on YouTube and you look at, there's, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, which is like arguably, one of the most amazing pieces of music ever written, whatever, and there's millions and millions of likes. There's still like thousands of people who are like, thumbs down. Like, nah, not for me.
I mean, yeah.
And there's just, and that's just the thing. Like when you try, you end up making something that doesn't feel honest, or that doesn't feel like it has a point of view. And I think that especially like for commercial artists, there's a big pressure. There's a lot of pressure for me, and I'm constantly sort of thinking about this I have this company now and sales goals to hit because I have all these employees whose health insurance and salary and everything depends on me having ideas that sell to people. And yet some of the ideas that I think are most important to put out in the world are not ideas that retailers see and say, yes, that makes sense in my store, because they're weird and they're different and it's not a birthday card, And so it's this constant sort of, and you have to just really be true. You have to be true to who you are and not worry about about whether everyone's going to like you, because they won't, So that's one, especially with social media. People are going to be mean. It's just like, it's not your fault.
Beethoven's Ninth Symphony is a great example.
I think that's such a good example, right?
Yeah.
It's like that I can just picture like all the people at their computer just like, thumbs down.
Sucks.
That sucks.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Emily McDowell, thank you so much for being on 3 Books.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
People are going to be mean, and it's not your fault. You have to be comfortable with who you are. In Emily's story and her sharing her 3 books, but also the themes underneath them, I feel like that's like kind of the universal message, right? She's helping people, and she's helped me just be more comfortable with myself. I mean, I'm looking at emilymcdowell.com. I mean, here is just some of the examples of the messages she's putting out into the world, which I love. This one is for people who have a friend who's going through kind of illness. There's a card that says, how about the next non-doctor who thinks they can cure you gets smothered with kale? Which is funny, but also, it just kind of like gives you energy when you're going through things. Here's another one for illness. Invisible things that are nevertheless real. Gravity, air, and chronic illness. I see you. I'm here for you. I like this one. Wishes for you both on the occasion of your wedding. Okay, this is a wedding card. It's better than any wedding card I think I've seen before. May you always hold hands, share secret looks, and cultivate a private language that only the 2 of you can speak. May you always find things to talk about and places to explore. And may you prefer things to be the same level of clean. May you take turns being strong and weak. Keep a secret list of what delights one another, and always have a trick to pull out of your hat. May you find that together things are easier and more fun and more interesting. And may you always remember what it felt like to fall in love. And if that wasn't enough, I'm going to close. There's a couple other more. I want to read so many of these cards. I like this one. Behind every great woman is another great woman replying to her frantic texts in the middle of the night. Thank you for being that woman. That applies to men too. And wishes for your birthday. Let's close with this one. Wishes for your birthday. This is a great birthday card. I love that Emily made and put out. My wishes for you on your birthday. May you find time to make your kind of art, read good books, help other people, and try new things. May you feel an invisible force field around yourself that lets you know you're safe, supported, and seen. May you never lose your keys, always remember what you need from the store while you're still there, and receive only good mail. May you experience more than an average number of excellent hair days. May flowers mysteriously appear on your doorstep. May you sleep like a baby, love what you see when you look in the mirror, and find something important that you thought was gone forever. Happy birthday. I love these cards. I love the work Emily does. I love what she's putting out in the world. I love that phrase. It's for the things, it's for the relationships we have, not the relationships we want to have. I really feel like articulating our emotions and our relationships is something that we can all do better, myself included, for sure. And that's why I'm going to go out. I'm going to go out and say, I love the relationship that we're having and that we're building in this show. I am hearing from so many of you. You are calling me. Please keep calling me at 1-833-READ-A-LOT. Let me know what you think of the show and what you think we can do to make it better. And thank you so much to Emily McDowell for adding, let's do the summary here, number 954, The Liars Club by Mary Carr. Number 953, Bird by Bird, Some Instructions on Writing and Life by Anne Lamott. And finally, number 952, The Book of Shrigley by David Shrigley. The mathematicians out there might notice that the count is a little bit off because my wife Leslie in the very first chapter gave us one book instead of three, right? Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein. So I've got to figure out a way to get the numbers back on track. We've got 14 years figured out, but I have a plan, which I'm going to share with you soon. I think there's somebody I want to ask for 4 books from, and I'm going to share who that person is and why I'm going to ask that person for 4 books instead of 3. And I'll do that a couple times over a decade or so, and then we'll get back on track for the big finish. Until next time, thank you so much for listening to 3 Books. And now, if you've made it to this far in the podcast, I want to welcome you back to the end of the podcast club. Yes, this is the special little suffix that we add to the end of every show. It's a little interactive bit where you call me, I talk to you, we hang out for a few minutes. And one of the things that I haven't done too much of is take one of our values. We have all these values for the show, right? If you go to 3books.co/values, there's a list of all our values. They're always evolving. They're dynamic. They are influenced by the things you tell me and the things that we're hearing on the show. And we talk about them. As much as we can. So let me do that. Here's a value that we don't talk about yet too much. Okay. Yet too much? Okay. I'm not going to change that. That's just the way I talk. Okay. Here we go. Librarians are doctors for the mind. This is one of our values. It comes from the fact that part of what we're celebrating here are people who are really, really good at recommending and advising you on what book to read. That's what I hope these 333 people can be. That's what I hope this show can be. And that's what I think a really good librarian can be. You go to a doctor because you got a problem with your body. This doesn't work. This hurts. I'm bleeding from here. What do you go to a librarian for? Not because you got a problem for your mind, but maybe because you want to be scratched and stimulated and provoked and expanded in a new way. I love how in chapter 16 with Mitchell Kaplan, he gives that great example of sort of the white Jewish housewife reading a book about an inner city kind of guy from Haiti and how the world can connect through literature. That's about the Miami Art Fair, I think, that Mitchell Kaplan helped start. 400,000 people going down to Miami every year for that. And that's the magic of books. That's the magic of a good librarian. We have a great librarian near us in downtown Toronto. Her name is Joanne. I've asked her to be on 3 Books, and she said no. And I said, please. And she said, no, I'm not comfortable. So Joanne, if you're listening, I really do want you on the show, but I won't obviously force you. So if you don't want to, that's fine. But Joanne's the best at recommending books. I go in there with my 4-year-old, and we talk about all the books he loves, all the books he's interested in, all the things he's interested in. And she just literally walks around the library with us for half an hour and picks out these gems. That's how we kind of found the Alfie books. If you have a 4-year-old and you want to read some interesting books, check out Alfie, Alfie. There's a huge series of books from England, and they are magnificent, especially for 4-year-olds. But I find them interesting too. And so she's great. Librarians are doctors for the mind. That is one of our values on 3 Books. And now let's go to the phones. As always, give me a call at 1-833-READ-A-LOT. if you have a question or a comment, or you just want to share one of your most formative books with us. We love that. If you want to share your most formative book, just call us and tell us what it is. So let's go to the phones.
Neil, hi. My name is Morris. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I just found out about your podcast, and just the other day, and I've listened to 3 of them already. And I got to tell you, I'm hooked. You got me hooked. I just finished listening to episode number 3, and I just don't know what to do now, because now I don't have any time to do anything else. But I'm ordering books and I'm reading tons of books now, so I don't know how I'm going to get any work done. But I love reading, and this podcast is perfect for me. Really, really enjoying it. Keep doing it. Really looking forward to listening to the other episodes as well. Just want to tell you I'm a big fan. Part of the book buying spree that I just have gone on is I bought 3 of your books. I just found out about you, so I'm trying to read as much as your material as I can. So just want to tell you how excited I am to listen to the rest of the podcasts that you have already posted, and for all the new ones you have coming up. Really looking forward to it, and really looking forward to reading all the material as well. Keep doing the great work that you're doing. Thank you so much for what you're doing, and really looking forward to it. So we'll be in touch. Thank you. I'm going to the website now, to that secret website for us. So thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Morris from Brooklyn, thank you so much for your call. And you and me both with the problem of too many books. But here's the thing. It's like, if you have too many books on your bookshelf, you're ordering too many books, you're spending too much money on books, you have too many packages at your front door, all these things, like, isn't it the world's best addiction? You know, there's so many things you can be addicted to. There's so many chemicals. There's so many drugs. There's so many forms of entertainment and pleasure. But like reading, I mean, it's got to be the best addiction. I can't tell you how much money I have spent on books, even just this year, not just buying the 3 books for everyone on the show, but also my own books I buy, and then I realize, oh, I don't want to read this, or I start reading it and I don't like it. So I return them, or I sell them back, or I leave them in a sharing library. I feel like the bookshelf is more dynamic in my house now than it's ever been. It's like something I probably touch every day. I take something off, I prune it, I leave things on, I add things. Sometimes I buy a book because it's just got a new cover. You know, it's just a different cover of a book I already have, and I'm like, I like this cover too. I need to own both of them. I did that recently with The Reluctant Fundamentalists by Mohsen Hamid. I found like an older version of it, and I was like, oh, this cover's better. I think I want both. But I can't get rid of the one I have because that's the one I read. So I have a special connection to that too. Point is, you've got the greatest addiction of all, which is spending all your money and time on books. Thank you so much for your call. And now it's time for the word of the chapter. And for this one, let's go back to Emily now.
At the time, this was 2011, and there were just like a million Valentine's Day cards out there, but like more than half of relationships on Valentine's Day are super fraught.
Yes, it is fraught. Fraught, F-R-A-U-G-H-T, which means, it's an adjective which means of a situation or course of action filled with or destined to result in something undesirable. You know, fraught with anxiety, fraught with stress. Where did this word come from? You know, it comes from the late 14th century. It is, you know, so like, you know, 600 years ago, 6 to 700 years ago. There was it was the past tense of the word freighted, laden, loaded, stored with supplies. When people used to store stuff on boats, basically, it was fraught. It was full of. It was loaded with cargo. So fraught is the past tense of a Middle English word fraughten, which means a load or a cargo. Makes sense. So when we say fraught with, we're kind of saying freighted with or loaded up with something. And so here we come to the end of chapter 17, the full moon conversation with the wonderful and lovely Emily McDowell. It is a privilege and a pleasure and an honor sharing these conversations with you and together uncovering the 1,000 most formative books in the world. Thank you so much for taking this journey.